Hello and welcome to Inspirational Focus. I'm Craig Klein, a deacon in the Episcopal Church. Today, a unique program with a slightly different focus. We're going to talk about churches and financing. And to help me broker this conversation, I'm pleased to have with me a co-host for this particular show. He's the executive producer of Ohio State University Rio Grande Telecasts. His name is Patrick Dengel.
Well, thank you, Craig, for
welcome to the show.
Having me talk with you because there's one thing that I know: money is extremely important, and
It is.
we when we couple it with the churches, we have to.
That's true. And it's easy enough to think that other people will somehow cover the spread, so to speak, and all the maintenance will magically be done, and the electric bill will be paid, and we'll have supplies in the Sunday school room and that sort of thing. But actually, churches have very detailed budgets.
Sure.
And they rely on a number of funding sources. Most often it is thought of the primary funding source is actually each individual person or parishioner that attends a given church. But there are other sources of money which we will discover in conversation in this program. So again, Patrick, welcome.
Well, thank you. You know, one of the things that is shocking to some individuals, you know, churches are a spiritual guiding background of individuals, and it really doesn't matter what faith that you have, as long as you have a strong commitment to the tenets of that church.
That's correct.
But churches also are nonprofit and they are businesses. And when individuals do give donations, many times those donations directly and indirectly go to the well-being of that church and the community that it serves.
It's true. There is a traditional way that this is broken down, and the 3 T's, as it were: time, talent, and treasure. So a very typical and traditional approach when asking people to support the church isn't necessarily asking for money. You can ask them to give of their time, to help prepare meals, to help do childcare during services. There are any number of things you can ask people to consider giving their time to. If they have a particular talent, as in, for example, they can play a keyboard instrument, they might be able to have some connection with the choir, if you would like a choir, that sort of thing. So you have time and talent, and then the third part of that 3-legged stool is treasure, which of course would be money. And there are some people who are very able to give of their time, and some who are able to give of their talent, some who are able to give of both. But then treasure is less flexible. And so...
Well, you know, everyone has to give what they feel that is in their heart.
That's true.
And, you know, it really helps. You know, for instance, as a deacon, you incur certain expenses when you go to visit the sick or when you minister to individuals, etc. And you have the choice of donating that to the church and to God. Sometimes it is helpful if your own means is very limited, and let's face it, many of the spiritual individuals are not paid huge salaries.
No, not unlike being an educator. Being clergy is not something that most people I've ever met aspire to, because they believe they will be exceptionally well off after, as a result, financially. Right. But there are some things that we can highlight. So we're going to go to GoodNet here. We have some slides for you. GoodNet, as you can see, the gateway to doing good. Okay. So here's what we do know about giving in general. So past decade, massive jump in generosity. So we're not quite done with this decade, so I'll be curious to see what this figure would look like in another year and a half. Giving around the world has actually gone up by 240%. In the second slide. And what do we get out of this? Well, we get a number of things out of it. We get the practical benefits of having a fund to use to support maintenance and paying basic bills for goods and services. But as we are all reminded, giving makes you feel good.
You know, it is interesting that most individuals don't really recognize that unless it's during certain kinds of seasons, like Christmas season. You know, it is truly said that giving is better than receiving, and many people feel that. And it's just going to be the same way with what you're saying, is that people feel good, you know, about donating some money.
They feel like they've done something that is viable and necessary,
Yes.
and furthers the work that they believe they are there to participate in,
Yes.
kind of thing.
That is true.
But there are some interesting points to clarify here. Let's see that third slide, for goodness. This would be surprising to most people. People who earn less actually give more. So by percentage, the less someone earns, the more likely they are to give money to help others. We're talking about proportional giving.
Sure.
But someone who is part of the top wealthy group may give 1/2 of 1%, but that would be a size of their total annual income.
Sure.
That would be a sizable amount of money.
Sure.
But proportionately, 1/2 of 1%, people who earn less actually give a higher percentage of their basic annual income.
And it really doesn't say anything about their own faith or belief, or
No.
you know, it has to do with what we're comfortable with.
That's right. And everybody, when they do give, gives with a comfort level that they maintain. But at the same time, the amounts and the names are actually not usually shared with clergy. We actually don't know who's giving and how much. That's for...
I think that's good.
Yeah, we all think that that's good in general. So we have organized groups that help run the church in the business of a given parish or location, and typically we call those vestries.
Oh, okay.
And they're simply collections of parishioners whose task it is to do the business of the daily operation of a given church or given location.
The only time that I see where names are listed when a church is built, oftentimes in that church, in the windows, you will see selected names that gave sizable amounts to create that. But when it comes to weekly donations or monthly donations,
Yes.
I think many churches say, we suggest you give this amount, or we suggest you give that amount, but no one is there tallying.
No, not at all. Most churches that I have been in do in fact have that. They have this stained glass window is through the generous gift of, so the so-called legacy gifts, the one-time large donation, are typically acknowledged with a plaque of some sort.
Yeah.
You can carry it to an extreme. I have seen churches where each and every pew has its own plaque. This piano, this organ, this pew here on the left side, those kinds of things. But in general, only the largest donations are acknowledged.
Yeah.
And people who helped found a given church are usually honored in other ways.
Yeah.
No one I've never seen a sign on a building itself saying this building is here because someone donated some amount of money.
That's right.
There are some other factors in giving. Let's take a look at the fourth slide. Giving is contagious. Okay, if the notion is if one sees someone else doing good and giving, that could inspire them. No argument at all on that.
Yeah. And the next slide I found really interesting.
Okay.
Australians love giving. Now, that's
Okay.
interesting.
It is, because we're not there. But at the same time, it does say something. So you see who number 1, 2, and 3 are.
Australia, and then Ireland and Canada. Now this was as of 2012, I believe, and I'm quite sure there are other statistics that would. But it is interesting to see those countries that are willing to give.
And what's interesting, I think what's interesting to me about Australia, and it's actually many things are interesting to me about Australia, is it simply is it's a country that hasn't existed for a long period of time, not unlike ourselves.
Yeah. And Canada.
And Canada,
Yeah.
the same.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
So,
Well, I think those are very interesting. So what other slides?
we
did
have
you bring?
some Church Tech Today slides, and they're numbered, and some of these will take some explanation. So the summer slump is a myth. Summer slump would refer to decreased giving in the summertime when people are simply not around very much. But there are easy ways to work to space equal donations throughout a year. You simply set it up as a recurring debt, recurring debit on your card,
Yeah, okay.
on
Pl-
whatever
plus-
card you use.
Plus the fact that I know when my wife and I would go on vacations, we would visit churches in whatever place we were, and then of course we donated. So sometimes if you're away for the summer, someone else is coming in.
That's right, and that helps offset the
Right.
loss. But
Right.
with modern bill paying or modern electronic fund transfer
Yeah.
technology, there really doesn't need to be a so-called summer slump anymore.
Yeah.
This doesn't need to exist.
Yeah. And so number two.
Number two is giving data isn't reserved for payday or the end of the month.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. I can see that in earlier times when common and widespread use of electronic funds was not really in existence for the average person, I can see how you could be tied to payday and donating. Likewise, the third one, Sunday isn't the only day people like to give.
Well, I think if we look at the religions that we have, some religions, their primary day is not Sunday, but a different day. But that is true.
Yeah. Let's look at the next one. Let's look at 4, 5, and 6. Here we go. So this is what we do know. People give at all times of the day and night. Again, that's being enabled by electronic fund transfer and internet, the ability to donate via or through the internet. Mobile giving is the clear leader, but people like options.
Yeah.
Okay, well, everyone does. They're not afraid to give big on their mobile phones, which is really quite interesting.
Yeah.
For those of us of a certain generation, that would be all but unthinkable.
Yeah.
For a variety of reasons.
My generation, I just wouldn't do that.
Sizable amounts, certainly.
The last.
Let's look at the last ones here. Okay. And what we have here. So if you simply remind people that they need to give, and it needs to be recurring, and of course you can facilitate that by setting it up as a recurring debit, you can find that people also will, for the reasons that we mentioned earlier, about feeling good about oneself and then inspiring others to do things. Consistent givers really do show amazing generosity.
That is true.
Card-based giving, not surprisingly, is the most preferred method because it's the easiest. It's the easiest. I don't know, I've never read anything on this, but I'm willing to bet that on average we carry far less cash in our wallets and purses than we used to because we have all the cards. It's interesting that Visa shows up as
Yeah.
the card of choice.
Yeah, the card base, though, is both debit and credit cards.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And I know my wife uses the debit card much more than I do. I grew up with the generation cash is king.
There you go. Well, I'd like to remind everybody you are watching Inspirational Focus. I'm the host. Dr. Craig Klein. I'm a deacon in the Episcopal Church. And today we have a co-hosted program. This is Mr. Patrick Dengel, who's the executive producer of Ohio State University Rio Grande Telecasts. Our discussion, fundraising, and the church. So we have another set of slides that I think breaks things down in a different way.
Yeah, you were mentioning about my age and you young people your age, and Mike, who's behind the scene, the Millennials. You know, there are some different characteristics of giving, and let's start with the first one, the greatest generation.
Greatest generation, for those of you who need reminding on what that is, means you were born 1945
or less,
or before that.
Wow.
And 11.8% of our population is still around from that point in time. So what do the people who are now 75 and above in age say? They've given online in the last 12 months, an average, give 25% more frequently than younger generations. So the notion, there appears to be a largely unsurveyed phenomenon, a largely uncontextualized or defined phenomenon, that at least this generation and a senior generation gives more, because that's part of the culture from which they come.
Sure.
And you can read the numbers for yourselves in the greatest gen slide. Have that one back. They give to, they average at least $1,300 for giving, and they represent 26%. What I find this interesting, can we see that slide again? 11.8% of the population gives 26% of the total amount of money.
Huh.
And if ever a population group might be defined as being on a fixed income, I would imagine that the 75 and above group would be the textbook definition of fixed income. So this says a lot about an ethic and a mindset.
Yeah. And you know, the bottom one, the greatest generation are most likely to give through direct mail campaigns and donate physical goods.
Okay, that's amazing.
So let's see, the baby boomers.
Baby boomers, next up. Okay, so if we have the greatest generation, I'll fess up if it isn't obvious by looking at me. I'm a baby boomer.
I am too. I am too.
That's nearly a quarter of the current population in the United States.
And you know, just sort of define who is a baby boomer. It's people that are born in 1946 to and through 1964.
64.
Yeah.
So the post-World War II, post-Korean War generation.
Yes. Okay. And let's face it, it's the best generation.
Oh, undoubtedly. We gave the world music and we put a man on the moon.
That's right.
So, top that.
No other generation can say that.
No, they can't. If you take a look at, let's go back to that slide for a second, the baby boomer slide. You're starting to see the introduction here in baby boomers of electronic forms of giving. So we have Facebook fundraising, crowdfunding campaigns. It's interesting that nearly half baby boomers give what's known as a tribute gift.
Okay.
Do you know what that is?
No.
Okay, that's a gift given in memory or in honor
Oh,
of someone else.
All right.
So in order to honor someone, I guess we'd say it that way, to honor someone and the work they did in a specific way, a gift is given, often for a specific purpose, to acquire a piece to acquire furniture, to do some sort of ongoing perpetual maintenance, that sort of thing. Something distinctive and unique about the church building where this person worked.
When we look at that slide, notice the high numbers, like 71% volunteer locally, 9% internationally. That is amazing to me. As we get older and wiser, we are volunteering more.
Yes, that's right. And as we slip into those retirement years, that doesn't mean necessarily a decrease in activity for most of us who are baby boomers. Instead, we channel our energies through through volunteerism.
Yeah, and I noticed that there was a donating an annual average of $1,212.
Which is actually less than the average annual for the Greatest Generation
Yeah.
folk.
Yeah.
But it is consistently solicitation, or responding to solicitation, asks through things like voicemail, email, and text messaging, those kinds of things.
Interesting.
So
And now the next one is the generation, the Xers.
Gen Xers, which would be 1965 through 76. Okay.
They're about 20%.
They're a fifth of the population.
A fifth of the population.
What's interesting, a fifth of the population, half of them have enrolled in a monthly giving program, so that tells me that 10% of the entire U.S. population, at least 10%, is enrolled in a monthly giving program.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So it says a lot about the ethic that all generations seem to have in terms of giving. They also volunteer. Not quite, just slightly lower numbers than the baby boomers, but of course most of these folks are working.
Yeah.
But what's also interesting to me is that they are likely to fundraise on behalf of a cause, make a pledge, and volunteer their time. So remember, part of the conversation, time, talent, and treasure.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
Here's a group that is oriented, that has a special affinity for time.
And then you brought something about millennials.
Millennials,
And the millennials, what are the years?
77 to 95.
Okay.
Okay. So they're a little over a quarter of the population. 40% of them, not quite as high as Gen X, are enrolled in a monthly giving program. So a lot of this is similar to the earlier slides. 84% of them do give to charity. That's a very high percentage. But of course, the amount of money that they give, in terms of, we see here, 481, but it's across 3.3 organizations. So there is a consistent, a high amount of giving, but the percentages are lower in terms of actual dollar amounts.
And then finally, well, maybe we have
some charitable giving for churches slides. Let's take a look at those. Okay. So giving to religion, defined as giving specifically to congregations, denominations, missionary societies, and religious media, is the largest recipient of charitable giving in the United States and always has been. Okay. So in the age in which we live in, this is quite interesting, just shy of 50% of all transactions are made with a card.
Yeah, it could be a debit card, a
Sure.
credit card.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what's also interesting is that 80% of the people who give to churches have a zero debt limit. So
Now
they're
that-
not there.
that I
That's
find-
really quite interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
And why is that quite interesting? Because all of these things would be of great interest to a church or a faith-based or religious organization that's looking to secure funding for whatever the purpose may be. While giving to building maintenance is a tough sell for a lot of people, giving to mission and giving to cause does fire imaginations in quite a few people.
Sure.
And so supporting the work of a given organization, church-based organization, can be seen as actually very attractive, in addition to any other reasons that a person might
Sure.
give.
Well, one of the things, though, that I have to stress more than anything else is that in a specific church, you have lay people that do above and beyond kinds of work. You have deacons and support staff that do various different things. And it's unfair to say they should give of their time and forget about salary and things of that nature. And that's not the case.
No, not at all. I can't imagine it isn't incredibly obvious that clergy give of their time and talent.
Right.
It's how else can they function?
Sure.
Or we function.
Right.
But the notion of expecting someone to do something isn't really enter into the conversation.
Right.
Because there are other ways.
Right.
But let's go back to the slide for just a moment or two. There is the concept of tithing. I've met very few people in my life that actually do this. So tithing, as you know, is giving how much?
I had heard at one time 10%.
It's 10% of your entire gross income.
Gross.
Not your net, not your, yeah. So given what it says here, 10 to 25% of makeup, and tithers are 10 to 25% of a normal congregation. I suspect that number is significantly lower
Sure.
than this. You can tithe online, but it's extremely difficult for most people to budget 10% of everything that they earn. And one little thing that's interesting in the time that we have, the very bottom, let me see. Let's see. 17% of American families have reduced the amount they give to their local church. 10 million tithers in the U.S. donate $50 billion yearly to churches and nonprofits. And what's interesting is that 77% of those who tithe actually give something beyond the 10%. So while tithers are not overly abundant in the general makeup of church populations, those that are there are well above the traditional amounts associated with the act itself. So, and again, based on gross income and not net. So where does this leave us?
Well,
Sir?
we only have 1 or 2 more minutes, and boy, I'd love to talk with you more about some of the statistics that you have, but just a couple thoughts that maybe you'd like to comment on.
Sure.
As a deacon in the church, what's the amount of time would you say is directly and then indirectly related to activities in that church?
Of my time?
Yes.
My time quickly, I have fixed obligations in terms of worship services, expectations, visitation, teaching, doing study groups, that sort of thing, and just general helping out around the place. I also have expectations that I will go and assist other churches when they are in need of someone to conduct a service. Above and beyond that, most of the time that I spend, I do not request mileage for. And I have no expectation of remuneration of any kind.
And so that brings us to the final thought, and that is that when you do give to the church, you are also helping those individuals who help others share in their time, talent, and treasury.
They do. Patrick Dengel, thank you so much for joining me today. You've been watching Inspirational Focus. Focus on churches and finance and giving. I'm Dr. Craig Klein, a deacon in the Episcopal Church. Thank you for being here.